Are you frustrated with your portraits looking disproportionate? Do you want to create realistic but creative pieces that reflect your voice? Well, in this video, I want to show you how you can use values to create perfect proportions and also expression in your work. If you want to transform your flat, lifeless portraits into masterpieces, then this video is for you. By the way, I'm Adam. I've been drawing for over 25 years and now I help aspiring charcoal artists come off the grid method so they feel connected to their work, master those proportions so they can take on those commissions and develop their styles so they have their own unique voice. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out anytime I post a video about freehand drawing and expressive realism. Let's dive in. Now, before we jump straight into the drawing, let's actually take a few minutes and have a look at the reference first, just so we can build some kind of like mental blueprint in our head before we actually start approaching what we're going to do. Also, I've left a photo of the drawing up here as well, just because when I recorded this, it was a little out of focus. So I'm going to leave the finished drawing there just so it's a bit more clear. So Tom Hardy from Mobland. I screenshotted this photo just here. This is from, I believe, the opening scene. They want to try and make it as dramatic looking as possible, which really works in my favor because it also means that I get a dramatic looking reference to work from as well. So is there anything that stands out to you when you look at this? Anything that really catches your eye that might help you with how to approach the portrait? So we have a very strong light source coming this direction just here, and it is specifically placed to create these big pockets of shadows in his eyes, and it hits only a few places in his face, here, across his head, a little bit here, parts of his ear, sides of his face, and little bits of hair as well, which basically means everything you see all in here, all covered in a shadow. All the details in his eyes, beard, lips, everything, all covered in a shadow. I know this might seem pretty obvious, but what this does mean is when we actually come to drawing the portrait, we want to make sure that we get that base shadow in first before we actually start to even think about even getting any of the placements of the actual features themselves. Because if we focus on the placement of the features first, it's going to be so much more difficult to try and navigate around the drawing because we're viewing the drawing on a white piece of paper when the actual reference itself, you're comparing it to almost, I'm not going to say black, but just a very heavy dark tone instead. So we almost want to kind of match that foundation before actually focusing on the features, which is why at the beginning you'll see me lay down a base value first before I do anything. Okay, what else do we see? Let's have a look at his eyes. Now, if you really actually have a look at what's going on, there is almost no information going on in here whatsoever. Basically got rectangle shapes mixed with a triangle and then a little line that comes through. Let's just get rid of this. So that's his eyes. That's how simple they are within the reference. We don't want to overcomplicate the eyes when we draw this. We literally just want to draw what we see. Now, if we have a look at actually the final, yeah, there we go. Let's really zoom into this. If I draw around, let's get rid of that one as well. There we go. That's how simple I have done the eyes. I think when it comes to eyes, especially in portraits, there's this idea that, you know, they're the window to the soul, which, you know, I guess they are in some cases, and in other cases they're not really. I mean, look at this, they're just a couple of basic shapes. That's basically it. And the reason why they look like this is because there's such dramatic lighting falling across the eyes that the shadow is creating almost so much noise that it's getting rid of all of that information within the eyes. Another thing to take note as well is there's no white in the eyes, even though there's a lighter area within the eyes. And if we actually have a look at our own eyes, there's a white color in there. Doesn't mean that it's a white value. White color and white value are two very different things. So for instance, this is a white color, but this area here, that's a white value because the actual range of tonal shading goes from black to white. So it goes from the darkest all the way to the lightest where it's exposed, where it's just completely white. But a white color could also be buried in that tonal shadow. Let me show you an example. I'm going to color pick the value from his eye, just there. Let's go to a white piece of paper. That's the value, that's the white in his eye. And then let's color pick this area here next to it. There we go. So even though this is the white color in his eye, in terms of the value scale, it's quite dark. And in terms of the white value on the top of his head, again, if we put it on top of a completely white piece of paper, on the tonal scale, it's a lot lighter. Well, still darker in comparison to completely white. So again, when approaching this, we want to make sure that everything is put within the shadow. Now, everything that I'm talking about, I actually go into a lot more detail in my free guide. You can download that. I'll leave a link in the description so you can download it. Everything on there is what I still use today, and it's what helped me master proportions and also develop my own style as well. So download that guide because it really helped me. So I know it also really help you as well. So as you can see, all I've done is just draw the outline of his face, and then immediately I go in to adding some of this background. I don't recommend doing that because I did absolutely no kind of like double measures in terms of making sure everything else is actually correct and makes sense. But because I was so excited to start it, I just wanted to get stuck in immediately. And because I've been drawing for a little while, I was fairly confident that my measurements are correct. But again, wouldn't recommend it. There you go. Now you see, now I've started putting in those measurements. Ideally, you want it to be the other way around. What you can see though is I don't actually map out too much because I'm focusing on separating my shadows from my lights. Everything is going to get covered up anyway. So as long as I know roughly where this eye socket is and roughly where this shine of the nose is, that's all I need. And then I just put an entire base coat of value down to separate the shadows from the lights. Not focusing on detail, not focusing on features, all value shapes. That's all I'm looking for. The values in this drawing are going to do all of the heavy lifting. If I don't make sure that I've really secured those values in first, the drawing will just kind of fall apart. So now I've got my anchor point, which is this one here, and then I've got a landmark, which is the light source of the nose. Now my anchor point, this is what I'm going to use to properly measure everything else. So as soon as I have my anchor point in, even though I know it's not 100% correct at the moment, it's enough for me to feel more confident to start putting a more defined line around the edge of his portrait. So I've started as broad as I can, and now it's finding the next lot of deep shadows within those core shadows, which is across his nose and then the other eye socket as well. I've just put just enough information to let me know where the mouth is, which then gives me that confirmation that I now definitely 100% that the bottom of his chin is correct. So I can start putting that heavy shadow coming down this way as well. So now we're almost at like a checkpoint within the process of the drawing. I have all the core factors that I need. I've separated the shadows from the lights. I've got the shape of his face. I've identified where his features will eventually be. And then I've got the beginning stages of the composition and overall look. So everything is there now. I have my foundation that I can build on. What we do now is we just repeat the process. I go around the side of the face again, just giving it a bit more definition, giving the ear a bit more definition, and just kind of rendering it a little bit more. And now this is where I put the very first signs of the eyes within the portrait. Remember, just keeping those very basic shapes. Don't want to define them at this point. Just want to make sure that position wise, they're accurate. Once I have my eyes more locked in, I want to make sure that it's balanced within the rest of the portrait. Again, kind of want to get it to that next checkpoint. So I'm making sure that the nose, the mouth, the surrounding areas are all balanced together. And then the focus switches from likeness to contrast. So now I want to boost that depth and that mood within the drawing. So I start adding much darker values in those specific areas that will then make my highlights more exposed. And just by doing that, it now naturally gets me to that next checkpoint. Now this is the stage of the drawing where it actually gets really fun. Because I'm not worried about the likeness anymore, maybe not worried, but focused, I can now shift my focus in how do I want the rest of this drawing to look. Because I'm keeping these areas very basic in terms of detail, I kind of want to do that throughout the rest of the drawing as well. So all of these shadow shapes falling across the rest of his face, I keep very simple. The most amount of detail that I actually put in this drawing are some of the highlights within his hair, and I start putting out a couple of the highlights within his forehead as well, and maybe like a little bit within that nose area as well. But everything else I've just left. As I say, I let all the values do the heavy lifting within this drawing. It now just becomes a case of finding areas that I want more defined. So I place his ear in, areas like around the sockets of the eyes, edge of his mouth, his chin area, and then just to balance those more defined areas, I pull out extra highlights within his hair, his ear, and a little bit of his jacket at the bottom. If you found this video helpful and you want to know more about my mentorship program, then click the link in the description. Let's get on a call, let's discuss your challenges, and let's outline a personalized roadmap for you so you can reach your drawing goals. Remember, this isn't just about improving your art, it's about finding and putting your own voice within your work. If you want to take the first step in becoming the artist that you want to be with a structured guidance, book a free call to find out more. I appreciate it. See you in the next one.